Okay, I want to start off by giving all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakah, Kwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone, who teacheth the Bible in 100% truth. And shalom to the hopeful elect of the 12 tribes of Israel, especially the 144,000, who consist of the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans in the land of the Americas, as well as a speckled bird, the Israelite foreigners living amongst other nations. Shalom to you. Okay, today, you're going to hear my voice as my nose sound a bit bunged up. Just going to have to bear with me. Um, just came down with something a couple of days ago. Really wanted to do this video about 2 days ago. Came down with something, but I've been taking a lot of herbal remedies. And it's starting to get, within 24 hours, it's started to get better. It's been 48 hours now, so my headache's gone. I think it's a sinus infection, swollen sinuses, which then your face, you get swollen sinuses, your face hurts, and all that kind of stuff. So just have to bear with me. But yeah, for that reason, I'm going to make this short. I'm not going to go on for too long. Just looking at prophecy yet again. We've seen the situation with Iran. You've got a war with Iran, the US, and the small hats, and that's been going on for about a month now. So yeah, today's the 28th. It's been going on since the 28th of February, and today's the 28th of March. In the meantime, there's a lot going on. This is prophecy. This is the end of an empire, but there's also a lot of confusion, a lot of different messages coming out. We're watching America, which in the scriptures is known as Babylon the Great, and Babylon is pretty much translates to land of confusion. So it can be quite confusing. We're watching what's going on with this war, for example. We're expecting Armageddon. This war will develop into the Third World War, which is a nuclear war, and that will usher in the destruction will then coincide with the return of Yahweh Shai, the Son of the Most High, who will then deliver his people, the elect, spoken of in the scriptures. But in the meantime, we're waiting for the MOTB, and without the MOTB, we can't have the destruction or the deliverance. This is Habakkuk chapter 2, starting from verse 1. It says, "And I will stand upon my watch." It says, "And set me upon the tower, and will watch to see what he will say unto me." It says, "And what I shall answer when I am reproved." It says, "And Yahweh answered me and said, Write the vision, and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it." So the prophet ultimately runs with it, readeth it, and tells you the message from the Most High, what's about to happen. It says, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time. It says, but at the end it shall speak. It says, and not lie, though it tarry." It says, "Wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry." And so we're in that time now, as we keep warning you. I've warned you that this war's coming up. Other prophets have warned you. We've said that once America goes into war alongside the small hats to go against Iran, this ultimately will usher in the Third World War. So the fact that they've gone there to do that is obviously Bible prophecy, and as it says, he's yet for an appointed time, and at the end it shall speak, which it is doing now. It says, "Behold, his soul, which is lifted up, is not upright in him." It says, but the just shall live by his faith." It says, "Yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home." He's always going into these other lands and invading. They call them regime changes, and so on and so forth. It says, "Who enlargeth his desire as hell." The word hell goes back to the word grave. So, he enlargeth his desire as the grave. Basically, he's pretty much willing to put people into graves to fulfill his desire. It says, and is as death, and cannot be satisfied. It says, but gathereth unto him all nations, and heapeth unto him all people. It says, shall not all these take up a parable against him? It says, and a taunting proverb against him, and say, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. It says, how long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. And so at the minute, you've seen Iran, for example, they're on the wrong end of, for example, sanctions which are been put on by America, using NATO, so on and so forth. And they've put sanctions onto them. They push Iran. Just one example, there's one nation that they push into trouble by bringing these particular sanctions on them. And then it speaks of a taunting proverb against him, which these other nations will come up with. It says, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. How long? And to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. So what they're doing, Iran, they don't have the firepower to directly come against the US and the small hats blow for blow. So they've got these different type of tactics that they're using. They call it asymmetric warfare. They send in drones, which aren't as powerful as missiles, but they're undetectable a lot of the time. And then the one weapon that they're using is the deal with the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, if you don't know, a lot of world trade goes through that particular point. And I might as well bring up a map actually. And even you've got oil supplies. It's a major place for oil supplies to be to pretty much travel through. You can see here it says, look, route of tankers, maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, which will pretty much travel through this path. So Iran are pretty much restricting that access now, and I think the latest is that they're going to let worldwide traffic pass through, but they're going to stop traffic passing through for the US and for the small hats. There's different talk going on, so on and so forth. Over the last few weeks, has been to various levels. Certain people have been let through, certain people haven't. At some point, it was completely stopped. And I think now the latest is that they decided to let people through, everyone apart from anything going to the US or to the small hats. So when you got this situation developing, you've got World War III. It's going to boil out of this particular scenario. We've seen obviously Donald Trump's, for example, saying to UN nations, you should be helping me. The EU, for example, the EU is saying, no, we don't want to help you. This is your mess. So then you have fulfillment of the 10 horns hating the whore in the book of Revelation, ultimately shooting ICBMs upon her. So all these things are developing round about as we go into this war. I mentioned previously in the last video that you got a lot of people that they put the message out there that America thought this was going to be an easy war. America went to Iran to do a regime change, and they thought they'd be back in 2 weeks. But now it seems like this is going to be turning into a long drawn out war. Some people call it a forever war. And I explained that fact of America wanting to go to a drawn out war fits perfectly with the plan that they want to do. You're talking about the wicked elites. The wicked elites don't broadcast their plan in the mainstream media news channel. They have propaganda. So in that propaganda, they said we need to go to Iran, we We need to invade. We need to make the world safe. And we can do it with our power. We can do it within a couple of weeks. So they send Donald Trump to give the message. And he gave the message. That gave the elites the excuse to get this war started in the Middle East. You go back to the Albert Pike letter to Mazzini plan for 3 world wars, and all you're seeing simply is them introducing this third world war. So another thing that's happening in the meantime, so you go back to this thick clay. Thick clay goes back to debt. You go to the Hebrew, I think it's a batya. You look up the Hebrew, I'm not going to do it, but you look up the Hebrew for this particular word, clay. It goes back to a batya, which pretty much means debt. It says, woe to him that increaseth that which is not his. So how long? It says, and to him that ladeth himself with thick clay. So America, has got this national debt. The dollar is the most, strongest currency in the world, and that holds up the global economic system. And if something were to happen to that, then the whole economic global system would collapse. Now, I've been warning you about this for, all throughout 2025. I've said many times that the war, we're waiting for the war, we're waiting for the mark of the beast. And I've said that the war is going to be the thing that brings the mark of the beast, because war will be the thing that will be the final nail in the coffin for the economy. And so when the war starts, then you'll see that us start to spiral towards the economy collapsing. Then that will be the reason to usher in a digital economy. And then at some point you'll see a false flag event, which will want them to make you take the device under your skin. See, the false flag to bring down the economy is this war. That's the banking elite's plan. So, they got the plan for 3 world wars. They put Donald Trump in power to fulfill it and to make the decisions that they need him to. He's doing it. He's taking a lot of flack for it, but it's fulfilling their plan. And so they're going to create a third world war. And the reason why it's important that they have America doing it is because obviously it gives them the chance to pretty much bankrupt the dollar and then ultimately crash the world economy. So really, when you look at the war in Iran from the point of view of America, you look at it from the point of view of the people, it's not going to plan, because they were told something which is a lie, and then that thing hasn't been fulfilled because it was a lie, and now people are up in arms. But we bypass the lies. We understand what's really happening. So we know the banking elites, the owners of America, want to go to war to bring in a crash of the economy, to reset the economy, to bring in a digital system. So them going to war, everything is going according to plan. So, from now, when you're watching the MOTB and you're watching the war, you're pretty much watching one in the same. You're watching this war to escalate into Armageddon, and you're also watching it for it to escalate the downfall of the worldwide economic system. And it's going to plan, because then you've got Iran, they will strangle the Strait of Hormuz. There's been a lot of talk about the world economy and things going bad, and obviously people paying prices. Some places it's hit, some places it hasn't quite hit. Although prices are still going up, life is still functioning to a certain degree in many places around the world. But it's on a knife edge, and like I say, the latest decision is from Iran to say that they'll let all the traffic through apart from the US and the small hats. They said that recently in the last 24 hours. How long they stick to that deal, I don't know. So ultimately what that's going to allow the world to do is keep moving forward while they suffocate the US economy, which is ultimately what the banking elites want to happen, so they can introduce the digital system. So the next thing is with Donald Trump, because you see Donald Trump, right? He said, Donald Trump's, he's not right in the head. He's clearly, he's not a stable person. If you wanted advice about something, he's not the type of person you'd go to, based on his track record. He's very unstable. And at the minute, it's almost like he's in his element. He comes out with these statements constantly, and they contradict each other. And he says that we're having peace talks with Iran. Iran say, nope, I haven't spoken to him for months. I don't know what he's talking about. And he, again, makes himself look stupid. Don't forget, he's the man that's been put in this position, and he has the banking elites tapping him on the shoulder, directing him. And so sometimes he says things in press conferences, with his staff present, and sometimes he's tweeting things at 8 p.m. at night, 9 p.m. at night, when all his staff are home and he's at home on his own, or whoever he's with. And so people, like, they're looking at him, they're like, well, he looks like he's losing it, and he is to a certain degree, because, like I've said, he's got this pressure on him. He's been told by the banking elites, no, this time you go in as Trump, 47, you've got to go with these technocrats. That pressure's been put upon him. You go with these technocrats, and we give you this agenda to follow. And on the agenda, it says you've got to go to war with Iran. He's thinking, well, I told these people I'm not going to go to a war, so I can't really go do that. But they're saying, no, it has to be done. This is part of our plan. Like I said, it's quite ironic that Epstein gets floated about at the beginning of February, and by the end of February, America have all of a sudden gone to war. Somebody's under pressure. It's that cruel Lord. So and now he's got, everybody's telling him what he's done is wrong. He shouldn't have done this. How you made a mistake. He looks like a fool. And ultimately, he has to play that role to do the job that he's told to do. Because if he doesn't do this, then the next thing is they'll just throw back up the Epstein problem. The people who are pushing his buttons. They'll make that rise to the surface again and make it become a problem for him. So, in the meantime, while they got him doing that, because Donald Trump doesn't have the, I don't think Donald Trump has the IQ to do what I'm showing you here. I think this is directed, this part that I'm about to go through is directed by the elites. They obviously, give him these phone calls 8 o'clock at night, tell him what to say. He goes online and he tweets. But it says how Trump and the oil markets move in sync. It says a tango in 5 charts. So, when you watch Donald Trump, and he seems like he's talking a lot of shit, and he does. That's what he does. That's Donald Trump. But at the same time, there is a type of method to the madness. When he says that he's having peace deals, or he's having peace talks with Iran, and Iran say they're not, it's because he's trying to basically affect the global stock exchange, the global markets, because it says here how Trump and the oil markets move in sync. So this is the BBC, dated the 28th. So this is this morning. I understood this a couple of days ago, and I saw bits of information, but like I said, I wasn't really well. So this morning I looked up, I found this, I came across this article. So it seems like other news agencies are starting to catch up. It's the BBC. It says it can be hard to pin down what is guiding Donald Trump to a month into the US and Israel's program of strikes on Iran. But it is clear he has an eye on the oil markets. This is a word or social media post from the US president about his plans to spark big moves in prices as investors leaped on signs the conflict could escalate or come to an end. It says, but in recent days, traders appeared to be growing more skeptical about the value of his comments. Oil was trading at around $72 a barrel before 28th of February. This is when the strikes on Iran began. Last week it peaked at $118 a barrel on the 19th of March. And as of Friday afternoon, which is yesterday, was sitting at just below $112, significantly up from its pre-war price. Here are some moments from the last month where Trump and the markets appear to have bounced off each other with varying effects. So Donald Trump, like I keep saying, America, they've got Donald Trump steering the ship. The banking elites have given him the instructions or the directions as where to go. He's going to crash the US economy, and he has to go to war to do it. Now, he can't go to war and then inside of a week crash the economy, and then people would say, well, you did that. So what he has to do, ultimately, he has to let it down slowly. If you take you grab somebody by the neck and you dunk them underwater, they're gonna, they can't breathe. They drown. They very quickly die. But obviously, if you keep dunking it, if you keep lifting his head above water to allow him to breathe, and then keep dunking him back down, ultimately you're still bringing him towards his death, but you're prolonging the life, and that's what they're doing. See, the banking elites are in charge of this. They've got Donald Trump pushing the buttons. Donald Trump's comments and tweets affect the stock market. So, rather than just go to war and let it tank, they're letting it down slowly. That's another reason you've probably heard why they go to war on a Friday. It's because by Monday, they can release certain statements. We did this, the operation went down fine. There's no long-lasting effect. And so the economy doesn't get affected. But we know that the plan ultimately is to bring it down so that they can introduce the digital dollar. Trump, so on the 9th of March, they're giving you a couple of scenarios. This is just in March alone, since the war began. The 9th of March, Trump raises hopes the war won't be drawn out. Oil falls below $90 a barrel. So when people are saying, oh, you said that the war wasn't going to last long, and now it's going to last long, he's basically talking shit to affect the price of it. So he goes to war, he causes a problem, now the price is up. So, rather than just make it look so obvious of what they're doing, he comes out with these tweets. He raises hopes that the war won't be drawn out, and that on 9th of March, the oil falls below $90 a barrel. He's playing a game. No matter who spoke to him, he's going to tell you what he's going to tell you, and his tweets affect the stock exchange. 13th to the 16th of March, Trump raid comments do not immediately affect prices on Brent crude futures. Had just finished trading. So, again, it's all about timing. Sometimes it's, just finished trading. And then, making comments about Trump's raid comments. So, raiding Iran. They don't immediately affect the price of oil because they just finished trading. This is what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. Or should I say he's been told what to do from the background. And the 20th of March, Trump signals on Truth Social the war may be nearing its end. And then you see the price again drops. You can see it here. The 23rd of March, within minutes of Trump's positive claims about US-Iran progress, oil plummets 13%. There's one more there. 25th to 27th, oil prices keep creeping up as peace talks are thrown into doubt. So this is the problem, you see. If you make it obvious that you're going to go there to a big, long, drawn-out war, straight away you get smacked with high oil prices. So what they're doing ultimately is they're drowning the economy, but they're doing it piece by piece so that it doesn't look so bad. How they're doing it is by going to war, but at the same time, obviously it's affecting world trade. Eventually, when these troops start to go out, there's going to be more money into that. Boots on the ground. At the same time, but while those things are killing it, Donald Trump's tweets are slowly giving it respite. Jonathan Raymond, investment manager at Quilter Cheviot, says energy prices may become a proxy for wider geopolitical and economic risks, spiking when Trump's language grows aggressive and easing when his rhetoric de-escalates. He says markets are rightfully sensitive to those signals, given the big economic risks that come with rising oil prices. Investors are trying to price genuine uncertainty. He says markets can look skittish or confused, but what they're really doing is managing event risk in real time, with oil sitting right at the center of that. But it can be difficult for investors to figure out how to trade, especially since some of Trump's comments seem aimed at influencing oil prices rather than communicating policy, says Brian Sitzel at the Banhassan Group. Says, as they say, the first casualty of war is truth. He says, I suspect some of the rhetoric back and forth around productive talks and the opposite very much are centered around just moving the price of oil. So on Thursday, minutes after US stock market saw their biggest drop since the start of the Iran war, Trump said talks with Iran were going very well, and he was delaying military strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure until at least the 6th of April. Says, but the price of oil continued to rise. Jane Foley, head of FX strategy at Rabobank, says market reactions are becoming more muted because of the huge gap between Trump's reassurances and the lack of acknowledgement from Tehran. See, so this is what they're doing. They started off by saying all this stuff to manipulate, and that's what you've been seeing the last 3-4 weeks. Trump keeps saying things to manipulate the market, but now what they're saying is slowly, it's starting to have less effect because people are starting to realize there's a big gap between what Trump says and what Iran says. So it's starting to, it says here, given the optics, many investors can now see that the early end to the conflict and markets remain anxious. Investors cannot see an early end to the conflict and remain anxious. Russ Maud, investment director at AJ Bell, says markets have also become accustomed to Trump often changing tact at signs of political or stock market or economic trouble. There is a degree of skepticism or even downright cynicism creeping in at the edges, he says. So, when I think of this war, all I can think is MOTB, Mark of the Beast. It's perfect. We're watching it, and we're speaking of Armageddon, the destruction, World War III, so on and so forth. But this war will usher in the digital economy, the false flag to bring in a new economy system, do away with the fiat currency, will be the war. There may then be another false flag for them to tell you that you then have to take a device under the skin. Like I say, Donald Trump's they've gone to war. There's a reason why they do things. They do certain things. They'll make an attack on a Friday. Like I say, they can either complete the attack by the weekend, by Monday morning, so it doesn't affect the markets, or they can release a statement, which then seems to appease the markets. At the beginning, Donald Trump was able to do that. Certain things he was saying, it helped the price rise and so on and so forth. And he's done it again lately. He's come out and said that he's going to give them till, what's it, the 6th of April. So they've got a 10-day window to come back with these peace talks. And that is in aid to appease the markets. Ultimately, they want it to crash. And that's why people are looking at him like, well, now they're starting to say, well, there's a big gap between what you say and what actually Iran say. So it's starting to have less effect. That's a good thing, because then that will then just drive up, the cost of things, inflation, so on and so forth, and it will escalate the end of a fiat currency, and it's all working to plan. This is Psalms 55:21. It says, the words of his mouth were smoother than butter. It says, but war was in his heart. It says, his words were softer than oil. It says, yet they were drawn swords. So, Esau goes to war. He says, oh, no, we want to have peace talks. But really, he wants to continue this war. And then at the same time, he's got these words which are softer than oil. He's oiling up the world economy, the stock exchange, the financial markets, ultimately they want to kill it. They want to crash it. They want to bring it down. They can't do it overnight just by going to war and just going all out. So it looks a little bit too obvious. So, they're trying to do it, like I say, piece by piece. At some point, though, you'll start to see this, prices of things start to rise rapidly, so on and so forth, and it will obviously cause other problems. But, what they're doing at the minute is actually, they're fulfilling the plan. I don't believe that Donald Trump has the brain power to be able to do that. I think obviously his instructions are given to him, by somebody from the shadows. It says how I've quickly looked this up before I go. This is Google. How Trump's latest 10-day deadline affected the US dollar. This is as of late March 2026. Trump's 10-day extension of a deadline for potential strikes on Iranian energy facilities set for April the 6th has created a volatile environment for the US dollar, causing it to fluctuate based on shifting geopolitical risks and inflation fears. And they've literally got it. The banking elites have got it where they want, sitting on a knife edge, ready to topple anytime they please. It says impact on US dollar, March 2026. Initial weakness from extension. The announcement of the 10-day pause following a 48-hour ultimatum initially led to a modest downtick in the dollar on the 27th of March as the immediate threat of major supply shock eased. Safe haven support, despite the pause and ongoing conflict in the Middle East, characterized by oil infrastructure attacks and the threat of a closed Strait of Hormuz, keeps safe haven demand high. The dollar index has generally held steady or risen towards the 100 level, and investors remain cautious. Inflation and rate concerns. The prospect of higher oil prices, with Brent surging above $110 per barrel due to the prolonged uncertainty, is fueling inflation worries and causing traders to scale back expectations for Federal Reserve rate cuts in 2026, which ultimately supports the dollar. Contextual factors affecting the dollar. Taco moment. Perception. The 10-day extension was viewed by some as taco moment. That's what people are calling it. Trump always chickens out, a term referring to Trump backing down on trade war threats. This is which initially dampened the dollar's safe haven rally before oil price surges re-energized it. Market volatility says the 10-day pause failed to significantly calm markets, with the S&P falling to 6-month lows as of March 27th, indicating investors are skeptical of a lasting diplomatic resolution. In summary, the 10-day extension has acted as a temporary relief valve on the US dollar. Exactly what I'm telling you. But the underlying geopolitical risk and high energy prices created by the Iran war have continued to support a stronger dollar in the final week of March 2026. So that, you see, they're saying is volatile. Ultimately, they're gonna kill it. Ultimately, they're gonna do away with it at some point. They don't really care how volatile it is. The banking elites do not want to make it stable. They want it to be volatile, but at the same time, so they're giving it bits of life just to keep it alive. But ultimately, they're not giving it enough. So in the long run, it will die. He's come out now at the end of March. He's given this 10-day extension to Iran, and this information has come from Trading Economics. Sorry. This AI has come up with this conclusion. In summary, the 10-day extension has acted as a temporary relief valve for the US dollar. So it's not about fixing it and repairing it and making it strong and healthy. It's about stopping it from dying. And they're going to keep doing these little bits to stop it from dying, like plugging holes in a sinking ship. But ultimately, they know that the ship is going to sink. They want it to sink so they can introduce the new digital dollar or digital worldwide currency. So it's all going to plan. But like I say, people they'll come up with this taco moment. Oh, you chickened out. But well, yeah, okay. He contradicts himself a lot. But what he does do is he manipulates the markets. Like I keep saying, they've gone out there to drown the economy. But rather than get there on day one and have it drowned by day three, everybody will say, "Well, you did that on purpose." So what they do is they drown it slowly, slowly over a period of time. And that's why we keep telling you this war's going to be drawn out. Boots are going to be on the ground. End up sending thousands of troops out there. It's going to be costing more and more millions. Produce more and more weapons. You're going to end up with a battle of Armageddon, which means mountain of troops. And then at some point, you're going to have this crash of this worldwide economy. People will be buying and selling. We believe they'll be using an app-based system to use the digital financial system at first. But ultimately, at some point, they will then tell you, before that World War III Armageddon turns nuclear, they will tell you that you have to take the device under the skin to incorporate yourself within that financial system. And that is what the Bible describes as Mark of the Beast, Revelation chapter 13. So I hope that's edifying. I'm going to leave it right there. Until next time, all praises to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rakak Wadash. And until next time, Shalom.